Now you hear it.
When you're a child, you learn there are 3 dimensions: height, width, and depth, like a shoebox. Then later you hear there's a 4th dimension: time.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen. We are once again drinking a funky red patina from Hellbent Brewing Company. Always good. How are you today?
I am winded from watching Steven Soderbergh films and quite thrilled to put it behind us. I have completed all of his filmography as of last night, and it's an intimidating thing to do with your favorite filmmaker, or one of them. He's probably my top 3, to put their entire canon now behind me. Not the happiest feeling, but yeah, exhaustive. How about you?
When can we expect your dissertation on Soderbergh?
Well, I've probably already written it and would just need to type it out.
There we go. Soon. That means soon.
Very soon.
I like it. That's right. We are talking about 2013's Side Effects from Steven Soderbergh. Our one and only film today. Going deep.
Rescreening.
That's right. But first, we'll take a look at our next deep dive, which will be of Park Chan-wook's The Handmaiden.
Yeah, before we do the preview for that, have you ever watched a Park Chan-wook film?
The only other film of his I've seen is Oldboy.
Yep, same for me, other than the Little Drummer Girl limited series he did with Florence and Alexander Skarsgård.
I take it back, I watched that as well.
But that's a limited series, so
correct.
The correct answer was still given by you. All right.
Right, we just watched the trailer for Park Chan-wook's 2016 The Handmaiden. How you feel about doing a deep dive of this one?
I feel a lot of different ways, which were expanded in my mind by watching that trailer. This is one of those few films that has a deeply special place in my heart that I didn't grow up with, that came to me in the last 5 years, where I just don't like remembering what the outcome is, because the journey there is so fun that I don't want to remember the twists and turns. And I am still currently evaluating personally if I am going to watch this more than once and deconstruct the film for myself, or if I'm going to tackle this rescreening assignment with a little bit of a different practicality or method this time. How about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking along this same lines, where I'm sort of interested in thinking about how Park Chan-wook sort of fits within some of these other Korean auteurs that have been on the map, especially after Parasite's big win.
Parasite, what's that?
Small film, wouldn't have heard of it. And I'm more familiar now with one of these lead actresses, Kim Min-hee, from Hong Sang-soo movies. She's his girlfriend or wife. I am kind of interested in tackling this more from the perspective of like maybe kind of how it kind of fits into like Korean film today, but we'll definitely do some other Park Chan-wook films as well, just because there's a lot I haven't seen.
Yeah. I'm thinking, other movies from this genre, perhaps, where I might want to see like other adaptations of books that have this type of element of criminality and expert planning ahead of time, that kind of lull you into a sense of false belief until the very end. And then I'm also thinking Korean cinema, Park Chan-wook as a director and his evolution. It's definitely interesting to reflect also on this film preceding The Little Drummer Girl, which I think we would both agree is a huge step down for him. Auteur-wise, at least. It was still a decent adaptation of a book, I think, but it was not nearly as engrossing.
I was not nearly as thrilled by that as I was by The Handmaiden, that's for sure.
So I think we both perhaps revere this film and are thoroughly excited to get to your selection here.
Word.
All right.
Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. We recently joined as members, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co.
And now on to side effects, Michael.
The main event.
The main event. I hope you're prepared.
I'm ready. You ready?
I was born ready. This is Soderbergh we're talking about. You're talking to Soder Boy. You ask questions, I have answers.
The deep dives are always funny to get started because it's always difficult to know where we start. Do you have an entry point? Or
yeah, I think that I'll fill the listeners in a little bit, since I might have a decent understanding of this film after watching it 4 times, including all of its deleted scenes.
Please.
The original title of this film was The Bitter Pill. It was an incepted idea into Scott Z. Burns while he was touring I believe, New York state facility, and he was invited by the nurses the medical practitioners in the mental ward to go witness a vampire. What they call a vampire, I believe, is someone who is coming down off of a drug addiction while in a mental health facility. And that inspired him to begin his journey into this idea, which is a very different idea than that inceptive idea. But I do think it's interesting, as an aside, that this is likely the preface to what led Soderbergh to the film Unsane as well. Mm-hmm. A different examination of the corruption of the mental health institutions. So other than it being called The Bitter Pill, it was also the final film of Steven Soderbergh in the year 2013 before he went and made the Nick with Clive Owen until the year 2017, where he returned with Logan Lucky, because he read the screenplay and was going to help get it made, but had decided that he loved the screenplay too much to let anyone else do it. And that film is one of my favorite from the last decade. So that's a brief overview of the background of the film. The film itself stars Channing Tatum, Rooney Mara, Jude Law, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and is a murder mystery of a different sort, rather, and also a political and economic examination of our institutions, as all Scott Z. Burns films are. No character is black or white. All of them are gray. No one's good or evil. They're all middlemen. Some of them have truly malicious intentions, and some do not, and that's the only differentiator. How's that feel for a starting place?
I love it. I think I remember reading that this one had some flashy marketing behind it, right? With some like phony websites for Ablixa,
yes, it did.
The medicine or the drug.
You can access that on the special features of the Canadian Blu-ray.
There you go. I feel like he took a page out of Jay-Z's book, doing retirement only to come back out and make a splash. Mm-hmm. It's not bad play. Yep. It works.
And, well, he came back only on iPhones, if we remember.
There you go. But he's coming back to actual cameras, right?
Yep.
Going forward? Or
yeah.
At least for
but
some
back when
stuff.
He first came back, he's like, only on iPhones.
Yeah. How do you like this one relative to his filmography at large?
Middle.
Yeah? Okay.
Top middle. Definitely not the top, because he does have so many films, and the top films they're things that I keep watching, or they're Aaron Brockovich. Like, they're just these things that accidentally end up being perfect. Or for whatever reason, maybe Aaron Brockovich to me is more nostalgia than perfection. But either way, I do put that on a pedestal as a picture, as well as Logan Lucky, as well as Unsane. I'd say it's better than High Flying Bird, but maybe worse than King of the Hill.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's definitely up there for me. I'm not really in a position anymore to do any kind of definitive ranking, even though I still like to try and do it sometimes, even though it feels futile. So it's up there for me. But this is also just my kind of thing. This is a little bit more of a Soderbergh Gone Girl or something like that.
Exactly. The fourth time I watched it, all I was thinking was Fincher, 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 Fincher.
It definitely feels like Fincher-esque, I would agree. But yeah, I mean, in terms of it being my kind of thing, just the cold, moody atmosphere of it, the noir-ish feel, these actors, particularly Rooney Mara, and just this kind of withdrawn quality that makes you feel like she's always keeping a little something from you, and she is quite literally, but that kind of performance that is just always a little bit repressed somehow, it's forcing me to lean in. I just find super captivating, and this kind of chill that's cast by that score and the look, which we'll talk about, all very much my kind of thing. Big picture wise, how do you feel about the vibe, the mood of this thing?
So, in order to address that, you briefly mentioned the score.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, the last time I watched it, so I noticed in the third that I hadn't paid attention to it, and the fourth time I watched it, all I did was pay attention to Thomas Newman's score, and it is the thing that makes the film work. I mean, he definitely had to do it in conjunction with Marianne, whatever her last name is, who's actually Steven Soderbergh, editing. But the score is the fundamental thing that's keying you in the beginning, like when you're watching this film for the first time and you don't know what's happening. That's the intrigue. And then when you know what's happening, that's the thing that's holding its middle finger up to you and setting the perfect tone. It's one of the best scores that I've ever truly broken down in a film, I think, and witnessed how it manipulates you without ever becoming the sole thing that people talk about with the film.
Yeah. I mean, obviously this is set in the world of big pharma, and one of the things that stands out to me is some of these segments that just look like they are out of a pharmaceutical commercial, with this kind of false cheerfulness and the falseness of the joy we're supposedly seeing in a montage where Rooney Mara's character is supposedly happy. The doubt is very much in the score. The score is always telling us that things are not okay. And it's very effective in that regard. If
I'm remembering correctly, the images on the website, as well as the website, were all part of the project. And then the click play buttons, those were the actual trailers for Ablexa that he had directed that are available. I haven't watched them as recently. I did them I watched those before I watched the film at all, just to kind of set the tone, because I didn't want it to inform how I was taking in the film the whole time. But I believe that all that material was actually substantive and something that was created not just for the film, but for the film marketing in the future. It's an interesting approach. Like you mentioned, Jay-Z had done it quite successfully. 9 Inch Nails had done it successfully. J.J. Abrams
like to do this.
So that, it's a unique synthesis of multiple mediums, which I think is what makes Soderbergh so good. In a recent interview, he was talking about screenplays and why he doesn't do them anymore. And he was explaining that he's not Spike Jonze. He's just not. He's not that good. He's not as good as Paul Thomas Anderson. There's no way he's going to go write for 4 years and write Phantom Thread. It's never going to happen for him like that. So he's just focused on synthesizing everything with the camera and the performers. That's his job. And then trying to get the best out of the material. But he's going to leave the writers to do the writing. And I thought that was a really good expression of kind of from himself of exactly what I'm seeing, where it's not the super opulent or delicate Shakespearean dialogue. You'd never trust Soderbergh to do something with that. It's more of a sleek time that's really well edited, that's shot in a way that's just got a knack. That just kind of pulls you in when it has to and pushes you back when it doesn't. And he doesn't always hit those marks, but I think this film is one where he hits those marks.
Yeah, it's definitely one where you don't get the sense that or I don't get the sense that these characters are ever really searching for their words. Like, there's kind of a confidence and sharpness to the dialogue. Like, it does feel written in a good way. Like, this is not, the kind of dialogue that's more in sexualized and videotape, where people are looking for the things to say. You have a sense that people in this movie kind of know what it is that they want to say, and they say it verbatim. Yeah.
Well, the other part of that, I think, is Rooney Mara's performance, where you're watching an actor act like she's acting like someone else. And that, there's a few moments where you really get to see her put that on display in her extended scenes. And that stuff is just really juicy to watch. Like, whatever direction and whatever performance, just instincts she has to pull off some of those scenes are truly mesmerizing, because when she has the saline put into her and she's doing that, like, just the manipulation and the display there are so interesting. And then once you know about the Victoria's Secret bag photos, watching her eye movement while she's on the couch during that scene, and the way that she's expressive and kind of very open with her arms, that kind of brings Jude Law in a little bit because he has to move to adjust to her body language. Just really, really nuanced performance that I just didn't see the first couple times because it just seems so effortless. But it's just perfect.
Yeah, that's a big reason why I think it's as fun to watch as it is. It's also one of the questions I have, like, once we know the deception that has gone on, I still have kind of wondered if we really see enough of a shift in Rooney Mara's character, if we really ever do see the person who plotted all this. Sometimes I wonder if, like, this could have been even more satisfying if there had been a bit more of, like, a reveal about the true personality beneath this, who harbored so much resentment to hatch this very complex scheme, versus the pretty straightforward moodiness that we get through the whole thing, which I love, which I really do like. But I almost, like, we learn something significant about this person without really seeing a big shift in, her, how she presents herself. I almost wonder if there could have been some satisfaction in that, seeing who was really kind of behind all this. But it doesn't really matter because I like the performance anyways.
I think that what you're getting at there is something that I noticed, especially the last couple times I watched it, which is it's not just with Rooney not feeling like a completely fleshed out character by the end, because the manipulator character that she claims never is truly exposed. There's never a conniving bad actor exposed. There's, like, a girl that was told to do something by someone else, but there's never really, like, the mastermind thoughtfulness exposed to the viewer. And then Catherine Zeta-Jones just ends up feeling like a bad person without, like, any real semblance of a clear motive. You don't get to know her character enough. She feels very underdeveloped compared to every single other character that has any significant screen time. I mean, I know more about Ann Dowd than I do about Catherine Zeta-Jones. And I think that that's just one of those weak spots of the screenplay. I'm not saying that it's a bad screenplay, but I think that, that just shows you where he didn't really have anything else to examine there. And so at the level of the screenplay, which is more or less a societal, sociological examination of fiscal structures and economic structures in the mental health field, he just ran out of ideas for how to make a bad person bad. And we never get the Jude Law level of thought process put into the opposite side of the story. And that's one of the most disappointing things about the film to me, and one of the reasons why it's not at the top of my list. Yeah.
So one of the things I think I heard you say in there was that you see Rooney Mara's character as maybe taken advantage of by Catherine Zeta-Jones' character.
Potentially, yeah. Well, especially in the beginning. Yeah, before the double cross at the end of the film. So if you're just going into the film from the beginning of the film that you're introduced to after the flash forward scene, right? Because you open on the bloody footprints, very Fincher, right? Yeah, and then it goes to 3 months earlier, I believe. Right, that opening that you're introduced to, that Rooney Mara, that character appears to be behaving at the masterminded instructions of Catherine Zeta-Jones. She later, helps get Catherine Zeta-Jones indicted, but through no conniving of her own, just through trying to survive. Like she seems like not very clever once you get to that point.
That's interesting. I think I maybe just saw that a little differently. Like, it did feel very much like a scheme that they concocted together. I think it certainly began with Rooney Mara's character coming to her with real problems, with a real depression, but the scheme was very much one concocted together. But
that's what the dialogue says, right?
Yeah,
that's exactly what the dialogue says.
Yeah. But I like that. You see Zeta-Jones is taking advantage of this situation to some extent.
Well, she's the doctor.
Yeah.
So yeah.
yeah, totally.
Doctor patient, you're always gonna have a hierarchy there of the doctor should be the morally responsible one in the relationship. And it just doesn't feel like Rooney certainly told her about like the insider trading motives, but like the idea to murder Channing Tatum, that just doesn't feel like something that she just came up with.
Yeah. To me, the big question that I think would inform what exactly I make of Rooney Mara's character was whether or not she ever knew about this insider trading. And
she did.
Did she say she knew?
Well, she says she knows through the screenplay by the screenplay telling us that Catherine Zeta-Jones told Rooney about like what to do to hatch this plan, and she told her about how to manipulate the stock market or like the SEC or whatever, right? There's that brief narration where we're looking at it at like just a landscape or a different character than her, and we're hearing her explain that stuff, I think, to Jude Law of what exactly happened, and that clearly shows us that she was aware of it.
Yeah. It's something like she taught me to feel sad, and I taught her about derivatives or something like that, which you're right. It sounds like you're saying that indicates she was well aware of what was going on. I guess I could alternatively just assume she dated a financier. She is familiar with that world. But yeah, I don't know. That is a question that kind of hangs in my head, because this is ultimately about the resentment she harbors for him for having lost her this way of life that she has become so accustomed to, and whether or not she was really down and informed with the means by which it was all achieved, I think is sort of irrelevant. But I agree. It is, a movie that is looking at how money and medicine are intertwined in some of these ethically dubious situations. But I think for me, the cleverness is that the fact that the movie feels like it is about that initially is sort of what's fun, because I think that ultimately becomes more of the context rather than the point, which has more to do with greed in a way, and this woman having become so accustomed to this lifestyle that it leads to a very pulpy kind of decision. But I think there is sort of a fake out in terms of the point being made, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitively a genre film, which I think almost all Soderbergh's films end up being. And, you never get distinctive clarity, but I do think that we get enough with her understanding the derivative system, as you mentioned, to know that if they invest in whichever other stock and then pull this grift on this pharma company, then that stock's going to go through the roof. And that tells me that she knew about that level of grift. Now, I don't know if that's exactly what Channing was indicted for, as far as the insider trading thing, but it's definitely indicative to me that it is, at least at some level. So maybe it's not a one-to-one ratio, as literally almost nothing in this film is black and white or good and evil. It's all mediocre grays, and then did someone do something with malicious intent or not, right? That's Jude Law's saving grace, is he never had malicious intent. until literally the end of the film. And by then, you know that he's not a truly terrible person, so you let him get away with sticking her inside of a mental facility forever because you don't know if she is crazy. Right? Because by the end of the film, she's literally like a plotting murderer using insider trading and like manipulating a doctor. Like, she might belong in there. Maybe he's got something to that. So he's the only one that ends up with any sort of a benefit of the doubt by the end. Other than Channing Tatum, who, you know, as always, is effortless and magnetic and gets killed off.
Yes, he does. Yeah, just the sequence of events I find so satisfying, that it is her having been accustomed to this lifestyle that is so satisfying. It is the loss of that money and that lifestyle that makes her unhappy and in this position for a system to profit off of that, and her inversing that and taking advantage of the system's intent to do that. I find that very satisfying, and it is pulpy, and it's sort of like just hard to believe that they could pull it off. It just doesn't matter to me because the idea is so fun.
And that's why it's just a fun movie, right?
Yeah.
That's why it's a good movie. At the end of the day, what is Side Effects? It's a good movie.
Fun.
It's a sleek flick. It's something you should turn on. But it's definitely got a lot of complex content. You know, as far as the economic examination, you know, this is something that Soderbergh loves in all of his films, is to examine, I guess, the hinges of where society functions. He likes to see where the money is exchanged, you know, where the hinges that you have to lubricate and put grease in. He's always interested in where that's happening. And here it's pharma companies, it's the patient-doctor relationship. It's also the doctor-state relationship. With the police and the judges that we find out. It's also with the pharma company that he was consulting for. And then in Magic Mike, it's Channing Tatum and Matthew McConaughey and trying to run a furniture business and get a bank loan for like 20 grand and having bad credit. There, you know, he just always is examining that. The girlfriend experience, the same thing, different level. The informant, same thing, different level. It's all about how does the system function, and what is a boots on the ground way of examining the flaws in how it's functioning. Yeah.
It's like every second or third character who says that they're on some kind of drug or another. And just the way people talk about it to me sounds almost like the way you would talk about a gym membership. They saw it on TV. The people looked great. They looked happy. Oh, there are some downsides. You know, this doesn't quite work. This part doesn't quite work. You know, just like you said, the kind of the mechanics of how this information is spread, and people's decisions are informed by what they learn from each other and how they're making decisions about what to put in their body in a way that's no different from how they would maybe buy shoes or something. It's about what other people suggest or don't suggest or say worked for them.
Yeah, so I think it's right after the consultation on the Haitian in the beginning that Jude Law performs at the hospital. It's a barely audible line of dialogue, but one of the nurses that's doing paperwork is talking to him about a long night and what he's drinking. And he mumbles, "better living through chemistry," as he's drinking either an energy drink or a coffee. I can't remember. And that is just the embodiment in one dialogue line of the film, right? Attempting to live better through chemistry for every single character involved. Now, some of them are committing crimes. Some of them are, you know, I would say Jude Law is the victim of the crime. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. So I think that it is an interesting examination of one tiny quadrant of the system of better living through chemistry, providing better living for different folks based on how you can game the chemistry system in the United States.
Yeah, and to me, I like the original title, "Bitter Pill," in a way, because I think it's partly about the bitterness of people when they find out that they have been gamed in some way.
Yep.
You know, firstly, there's Rooney Mara's, who's deeply bitter about her husband having messed up and having lost all of this, and then there's Jude Law when he realized that he's been played, and he is not happy about it. But Side Effects is a pretty good title too. I'd actually pick that one.
I think that the marketers chose the right title, but I would prefer personally The Bitter Pill, just because like it's a solid name and it fits the he in 2013 also released Behind the Candelabra directly before this film released. So it just, the triptych there.
Yeah. Do you like Jude Law in this movie?
I really do. I've always been kind of out to lunch on Jude Law. I've never felt particularly strong about any of his performances other than Match Point. Which I don't know why I like that performance. It's just one of those things that I decided as a teenager that was a great performance, and it just never left me. But I just watched Existenz last month from Cronenberg, and then watching this over and over, he's really durable and reliable. And when I remember him in Vox Lux, he was very durable, very reliable. He's definitely an actor that I think that I just didn't know how to unlock when I was younger.
Yeah, I think there's just a real believability to his confidence as a doctor, and then also an equal believability in his shrinking confidence as he realizes that something is not quite right. Just the word solid is as good as any, that he just feels like he is this kind of patient, non-judgmental, understanding character who we kind of suspect might be doing something wrong. This just seems like it's set up to expose the way doctors are taking advantage of patients, or the companies are taking advantage of people, and it's ultimately kind of going from the bottom up, and he's caught in the middle. But even just like the very first scene, he's literally understanding a person, and they're what it is they're trying to say in a different language. You buy it the whole way through.
Yeah, he is the bedrock of the picture. I haven't performed the mental exercise, but I think there's very few actors that could have performed that role as convincingly. I think of maybe Christopher Abbott or someone like that that maybe would have just really convinced me of the innocence and also role that he's playing in the system. But I think that Channing Tatum wouldn't have worked in that role. I think that he was perfectly cast here. That is something that I do find interesting, is casting what is normally a leading man as your dead character. This isn't Neil Patrick Harris with a slit throat at the end of Gone Girl. This is killing the heartthrob of America in 2013, and alluding to that murder in the first scene, and then performing it, I think, at like the 30-minute mark of a nearly 2-hour movie. So I find Soderbergh's tendencies to be one of the most fascinating things about his synthesis process, where he just kind of, like, everywhere where that there's like a way that the wood grain goes, he goes that way and then puts a little knot in there. And that's what makes it distinctly Soderbergh. Like, it's still clearly the same furniture, it's made out of wood, but there's a lot more knots in it at places you didn't expect it to be.
Yeah, I was just kind of glancing at like how it was received at the time, and it feels like one of the common reactions was that it got a little too convoluted. I think I even used that word in my own little tiny review on Letterboxd, and on a second view, and I was like, this really isn't that hard to follow. It's just kind of quick in its turns at the end, I guess. But I actually don't know that I agree with that anymore, that it's convoluted. I think that's the wrong word. To me, that sounds like it's hard to follow. I don't know that that's true.
I think it is hard to follow in the sense that the dialogue that tells us what's happening is at some points brief and crucial. So I think that some of the most crucial plot mechanics are very brief dialogue sequences, where if you zoned out for a second or took a bathroom break, you can come back and literally not understand the fundamental plot of this film, which is another unique thing I think about Scott Z. Burns as a screenwriter. I don't think it's so much Soderbergh as a filmmaker. I think that you could take a 30-minute break in the middle of Logan Lucky and still entirely understand that these gummy bears are going to blow this safe vault. Whereas that's not going to happen here. That's just as crucial in Unsane, trying to follow stuff. If you miss certain segments of Unsane, which is also about mental health, you end up missing the detail. I do find his preoccupation with mental health and societal systems, I think, the most interesting thing about rewatching this movie outside of each performer and, each person working on this film in their personal jobs. I think that just that overarching examining of sociology in America, because he's almost only ever done American films, is one of the most interesting things about him as a creator.
Yeah, and this idea that the decisions you make in terms of how you treat any issue you have is bigger than just your relationship with your doctor. It is a function of the ads you see on TV. It's a function of the recommendations you get from people about what they say worked for them or didn't work for them, and who those people are, whether it's your boss at work or a rando at a party.
So who you think is your colleague
that's
looking for an Oblixa sample and then says, "Oh, I only have a pen."
Yeah. I think arguably it's kind of a predictable movie. Like, there just aren't that many suspects, right? We've seen this murder at the beginning. Maybe you don't know that it's Channing Tatum who's going to get murdered, but there are only so many people even in this movie. I think I can understand someone who feels like this is predictable. Just not a problem for me personally.
Yeah, I think the predictability of it, once again, is not the point. That's the thing, is Soderbergh's always going to be in your genre, or whatever genre you think he's in, he's probably in, because he's pretty straightforward about being a genre filmmaker, even though he never makes it with the intent probably of just being in that genre. Whatever the screenplay is, that's the genre. He's going to lean into synthesizing that style of filmmaking, communicating it to the viewer, trying to make it a really good time or a really interesting film, whichever one comes first. Or he's going to do it for his own self-interest, a la Girlfriend Experience or Schizopolis, or the Grey's Anatomy, right? Those are films that are very, I wouldn't call them technically proficient, really. They're fine, but they're not the level that he's hitting here, or Ocean's 11, when he was doing his own cinematography. So there's different modes that Soderbergh works in, and here it's just about, I think, for him, communicating his feelings about the system that he's a part of in Hollywood before he did his mic drop, as temporary as it was.
Just to go run and pick it up.
Yep.
Give me that mic again.
Yep. Well, I made Logan Lucky. Let me do Mosaic now.
Yeah.
Let me make an app.
Yeah. How do you feel about the look of the film?
Yeah, you used the word moody earlier. That's exactly what I think when I think of this movie. It's partially because of Thomas Newman's score, but it's also the way that Soderbergh's getting the glass and the light. The office is a very interesting thing that he depicts in this film to me. There's a few different offices that we see. None of them feel monotonous. None of them feel truly dull. Each of them have their own little spirit and light. Rooney Mara's office is a little bit more dark and not necessarily warm, but really like an understanding vibe comes from the characters there. So you don't feel like it's a negative place. And then you have Jude Law's office, which feels like a pretty good place until his confrontation at the end. Catherine Zeta-Jones, the mood of the piece is very complex. We talked about the single upward shot. I think that's the thing that it's the exclamation mark in the middle of it. It's like a piece of visual jazz where I can't lose that single note that it did. That affected the entire mood of that piece for me. That's where everything goes up.
Yeah, it certainly makes you ask why. And then the fact that it doesn't come back only makes you stuck with that question.
Yep.
Yeah, you use the word cold, which I think is the right word, and that's certainly like the part that's kind of unnerving about it is that these are, decisions that should be kind of warm. Is how do you treat depression? How do you talk to someone about depression? Figure out how to tackle it. But none of these are relationships or have any real warmth to them to me. And it's funny that this ultimately becomes kind of an erotic thriller, but there's really no steaminess to it. Like, it still feels kind of chill to the touch.
The closest we get is Jude Law's stepson. interrupting him when he's tearing off his girlfriend's shirt, right? Like, that's as close to steamy as we get. And then we have that really, what would normally be a steamy scene anywhere else, where Rooney's riding Channing Tatum and then she jumps off and he says, whoever made this pill is going to be fucking rich. And immediately you're just like, you just have so many thoughts, right? Like, the first time you watch that, you might be convinced by it. And then the second time you watch it, you're like, is Channing thinking of investing in it? The third time, you already know what's happening. And you're like, is she even on the pill at this point? Like, it has nothing to do with this. This is just acting.
Yeah. And just the fact that, like, we don't even see people in the same frame very often. It is a really edited movie with lots of reverse shots where people are kind of divided not only into their own frames, but also with focus. You know, you're seeing people, one person in focus, one person out of focus. It just kind of accentuates how everyone's kind of in it for themselves here. Even though there are some relationships, just it kind of adds to that cool sense of kind of isolation, people navigating the system for themselves, and trying to trust each other, but that clearly not being a good idea.
Yeah, Peter Andrews, solid cinematographer.
There you go.
Also known as Steven Soderbergh.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's cinematography is awesome. Yeah.
I guess the performances are maybe the thing that are most memorable and perhaps least discussed, especially for the support. What do you think about, like, Ann Dowd and her role?
She's great. Very short role, but just the concerned mother who just doesn't understand why the drugs aren't working when she's seeing the ads. People are happy. What's the problem? Awesome supporting character. Yeah, I like Jude Law's wife, Vanessa Shaw.
Yes.
Very good. I don't see her very often. I would like to see more of her.
Her role, while extremely limited, is kind of wholly convincing, right? They walk out the door and there's all the press, and she goes, what is this, someone famous? And then the lines of questioning starts and she gets confused, and the delivery of the slap, that key slap with the envelope of photos, there's just so much juice there. Also, I think her name's Marin Ireland. She's normally given a lot more to do in a film, but she's literally just the person with the present in the jail, trying to get the present in. And normally she would be like a 7-minute supporting character minimum in a film. He's just brimming at the seams with all this quality. I feel like I've seen the character who plays the cop before. I don't remember his name, but there's just a lot of stuff around these characters that makes everything feel real, which is really the defining characteristic of Soderbergh movies working or not, is whether or not the offices feel real. Does it feel like a real diner? Does it feel like a real jail? I never found myself feeling that anything was fake in the picture, which is really, there's a lot of things that go into making a movie work, but if everything feels real, it's kind of hard to mess up a movie working at that point. It might not be a great movie, but it has to work. And this movie works. Yeah,
the prosecuting attorney who Jude Law ultimately goes to try and convince he's good. I kind of feel like I've seen him before. I probably haven't. He just kind of has that sense of, he kind of feels familiar to me. I thought he was really good. Yeah. I don't know that there are many weak players here, except that I do feel like Catherine Zeta-Jones is kind of in her own mode of performance, and it's very satisfying to me, so I don't mind it. But it does feel almost old-fashioned to me. This feels more like 40s Femme Fatale or something. Very breathy, very sort of silky smooth in her gestures, whereas everyone else is a little bit more inwardly focused, where she is very expressive in her gestures and her breathing and her voice, which is great, if you ask me. No complaints.
Yes. When she hits Jude in the back of the head.
Love it.
Yeah. She's an interesting... The whole film, cast-wise, just feels interesting, because I don't think Channing's done another film since Logan Lucky, if I'm remembering correctly. Right? Because right before Logan was Hateful Eight. Spoiler. And then Logan Lucky, and he's, I think, been working on his directorial debut since then, which comes out next year. So I'd really like to see him reteam with Soderbergh. Because though I don't think there's ever been a bad one personally, and I just really like him as a performer. He's kind of a Brad Pitt to me. He's a man of many hats. Every hat that he puts on seems to feel convincing. Even the terrible, Dear John movie that he did with Amanda Seyfried, he felt like a real character there, even though it was a bad movie. So I guess just examining those characters by themselves. I'd like to see Catherine Zeta-Jones do another picture with Soderbergh as well. Rooney's been off the map for a while.
Yeah. I couldn't even tell you off the top of my head what the last...
She did a narration for a documentary last. And I think that she and Joaquin are having a kid now, so I don't know how soon she's going to be getting back to it. But her level of performance, I definitely feel like a major loss there. The work that she was putting out with Fincher and here was just really special. Her work with Malick, Jude Law, he's going.
Oh yeah,
no stopping him.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was after Girl with the Dragon Tattoo came out that some people took issue with that performance, and I remember specifically the word vacant being used, that it just felt like that was sort of an empty kind of performance, which is not untrue to me, but I guess it's just exactly the kind of thing I like, that just feels like it's all kind of beneath the surface, forcing you to try and read her. I mean, I think the movie, the style, the score is telling us that there is something, not right about this whole movie. But at the same time, it's very much just in that performance, and this kind of withdrawal that I think is just magnetic. Like, the more you pull away, the more I want to, know what's going on.
With her as a performer, I think that there's some merit to that word. That performance in that film, no. I just watched it. Yeah, I just watched it. No, not a chance. That's definitely not a vacant performance. Her work in the library, when she goes to get her coffee and there's the attack and everything. Oh man, no, that's such a charged film. Oh my god, like there are scenes where she's acting aloof to try to protect herself, or because she's in shock from getting raped, or when she's trying to act vacant because she's tricking him into doing it again on camera. Which is brutal scenes, no doubt, but like all that is still that meticulous level of performance from her, where aloof is something she's very capable of, but that performance particularly is not a wholly aloof one.
Yeah.
It's very studious, I would say. Yeah.
Other thoughts?
What do you think about voyeurism in Soderbergh films?
That is that a theme that I thought of during this film? I can't say it is. I'm trying to think now how that fits into side effects. Let me stew on it for a minute. Do you have a thought here?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the camera angles that Soderbergh presents us with feel very situational and at the eye line of a human. So often I feel like I'm a voyeur of whatever it is I'm seeing. Some of them are certainly private, intimate moments. Jude Law on the couch with Vanessa, or Channing and Rooney in their room. However, when I'm in the office and he's having the confrontation with his coworkers who he runs the practice with, I feel like I'm a character sitting on the ledge in there with them. When we're at the dining room table, same characters, I felt like I was at the dining room table. Even the party is shot kind of like Rachel Getting Married was shot, there at the end before he's arrested, where it just feels like you are at the party. The camera's kind of just working in that way. Or you feel like you're Rooney as she's grabbing the note off of the windshield. I think that he's really technically proficient at using that camera to make you feel like you are standing where he's standing during these scenes. And I think that translates really well to feeling like you're the voyeur.
Yeah, he's one who I guess I think of. I don't usually find myself thinking during a Soderbergh movie like, wow, what a composition. I don't think of him as really like ever thinking in terms of like tableau. It's more
Painterly?
about perspective.
That's not
yeah,
him.
yeah. It's more about perspective, and naturalism is not the word. I don't know why that almost popped into my head. It's more about perspective, and I guess voyeuristic is a relevant word for this one. I think it's just even more apparent in something like Unsane, where we're cognizant of what perspective from which we might be seeing these things, whereas here it's kind of organic. When I'm watching Rooney Mara, I'm not usually really thinking of the point of view from which I'm looking at anything, even though it might feel like someone who is just at the train station were I to put thought into it,
Right, but I think that's just there subliminally, and I don't think that it's like an overt decision even by Soderbergh. I think it might just be like a passive thing, especially with some of his movies, where just the way that he shoots a picture, you end up kind of feeling like you are him, because he is the cinematographer of all these films that we're watching post Aaron Brockovich. So you kind of get the sense that you're there, whereas I think in a Deakins film, you never feel like you're a witness that's seeing things that you're not privy to. You feel like everything is set up and has that painterliness, or the Paul Thomas Anderson, Coen brothers, like storyboarding level to it. You know, that type of thing. Where here it just, and in not just Unsane, but High Flying Bird even, I definitely just feel like I'm there on the street, or I'm there in the office at a level that I don't with a lot of other cinema.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very common interpretation of his movies, is sort of tapping into some voyeuristic POV, I guess, which is always funny to me, because at the same time he's often very deliberately not shy about choosing angles that could not be from a person's perspective, like a gas pedal or something like that, right? Where it's right before she commits suicide, it jumps right to her foot. Well, that's not voyeurism, but it kind of feels like it is. So it's more about like how it actually just feels, rather than whether or not it literally is a hypothetical POV or not.
Yeah, there's a word that I've found myself this whole month watching Soderbergh again, drawn back to with him, and that's the word knack. Kind of like a gut feeling, or it's kind of got that semblance to it, where someone just has a knack for that, and you just let it go. And I think that Soderbergh just has a knack for getting the shots he needs to make me feel the story visually and going. Now, they're not tableau, as you said. They're not painterly. They're not decadent. They're not lavish outside behind the candelabra. But they are deliberate, and they just feel at ease with telling you the story. They're not overshot. They're never really indulgent. They just feel as if they are the entire semblance of the content, and you don't need any more. You're not asking to go back to that scene because you didn't get enough there. You got all you needed, essentially, from it.
Yeah, there's definitely kind of an efficiency to it. I don't know that I've ever described a Soderbergh movie as feeling bloated. Like, they always feel pretty lean.
Well,
though there are plenty
the
I haven't
laundromat.
seen. I suppose so.
I think that's the most bloated I've ever felt. Of his pictures.
But once a scene has served its purpose, he's usually ready to move on. There's not a lot of slack in these movies. They tend to move.
And I guess the other part of the voyeurism is the real worldness that it feels like you're not. I brought up Shakespeare earlier, but you're just never watching these, like, you're never watching Tom Hanks deliver a monologue to Julia Roberts, who's delivering a monologue to George Clooney, who's delivering a monologue to, like, it's not monologue oriented. It's all just quick, snappy rhythm go. He doesn't always make what I would call visual jazz films, but I think that a lot of his films do break down a little bit into some of those jazzy flourishes. The Limey is probably the most visual jazz of all his pieces, but Magic Mike has its jazziness as well. So I just think that that's part of what other portions make him a great filmmaker. He has a project coming out that's going to be a comedy on Netflix later this year. I'm forgetting the name of it, though. Stars Meryl Streep.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I can't remember what it's called. But...
And then he's got Kill Switch next year, which should be shooting next spring, if everything goes right, which is going to be a gangster picture.
I like the sound of that.
So I'm pretty excited. Is there anything else you wanted to go over here? Any final notes on the Bitter Pill in Steven's final film?
What about a favorite scene? Any highlights?
Ooh. Yes.
Shots, moments you love?
Yeah. There's a lot of moments I love. That's tough, though. I would have to go with Channing Tatum scenes, but I don't know which of his scenes. Probably when he comes home and looks at the sailboat, looks at the table, and then goes into the kitchen. And just the way that he plays that, the way that he backs away from Rooney and then is still like talking to her lovingly, just selling that scene. I think that, it seems like a really easy scene, but I think it's one of the most effortless death scenes that I've ever seen.
Very fun scene. I guess I kind of have two just because I like them for the same reason. One is the montage that's in the middle when she supposedly is finally feeling better, and there's kind of a montage of them, Mara and Tatum, on a walk, and they're very happy, and then there's the actual flashback to her at the picnic in his backyard before he gets taken to prison, and just how they feel like advertising in a way, and just perfectly capture that kind of phony happiness that you see in ads for these kinds of antidepressant or anxiety medicines, and how there's something just kind of unsettling about them, especially when there is those smiles on people's faces and the list of everything that can go wrong right beneath it. That movie, this movie is about what can go wrong and why people are maybe not happy when they say they are. So those are pretty good. That's
a great selection. Definitely reminiscent of a little bit of Putney Swope, those advertisements.
Oh yeah, Putney Swope, hard to beat. And that's another one in the can.
Now you don't.